This presentation is supported by our regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet drinking water standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield, to provide water conservation programs for the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of a growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. This is why TRWD supports many programs that help save water through outdoor watering and gardening education. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you are a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler system checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There is also an event calendar where you can find important information about future classes and workshops. TRWD also partners with organizations like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Tarrant County Master Gardeners to provide educational programs just like this one. Be sure to check out SaveTarrantWater.com and sign up for their free services.
All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a good day and hopefully a good evening. They asked me to talk about Tough Texas Lawn Care. We could talk about it for hours and hours, but we've only had an hour, so we got it down to where I think it's help you and give you some good advice. Remember, it is tough here. Texas is different, and especially up here in the north part of it. Before we get started, I'd advise you, if you have a irrigation system, to take up what they were talking about in there and get a free irrigation audit. It will greatly help you. The price is right. So I suggest you do that if you have not had it done in the last couple of years. All right. So lawn care, is different for everybody. Some people have nothing but lawn. Some people have flower beds and shrubs and trees and, and everything else in the world you can imagine. But it's not easy to do lawn care easily in our area due to a lot of issues. And we'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. Lawn care services, I thought I'd start off there because, lawn care is important. And how you're going to do it, who's going to do it, what's out there. There are a lot of different companies, Scott's, True Green, etc. That will set up a program for you for maintenance. They give you degrees of work on the part of the company depending on how much you want to pay. You'll also find local companies that do it. They may be small or offering only a lawn service, or they maybe give you a full maintenance approach. It just depends on what you want. All this technology, isn't it wonderful? Has ever worked out what is you need to shop, and find the best value for your home and for you. However, depending on the circumstances, you may want to do it yourself, and there's nothing wrong with that. I encourage you to do so. It's a good exercise, a good chance to be outside and be involved in Mother Nature growing some things. There are a lot of detailed lawn care advice that we can give you that you may hear from different people, different places, but there are 3 main lawn care tips that I think you should bear in mind when it comes to developing or maintaining a lawn. Number 1, soils. Lawn, just simply not going to thrive in a soil that is heavily compacted or poorly drained. The soil needs to be friable, so allow the grasses and the roots to penetrate and for water and nutrients to get into the soil that are available to be taken up by grass roots. A lot of times we come to people's houses or to their location and find their soil is just hard as a rock. So you got to think about that. If you're sowing a lawn or laying turf, you should make care to make sure the underlying soil is well. If you have a heavy clay soil, if you're going to spend the money to have it sodded or whatever, you might want to consider aerating it. You might want to consider putting in and tilling in some expanded shell or something like that to open up the pores. For existing lawns, may need to add drainage to particularly poorly drained areas. You should also at least ensure that you break up compaction by regular aeration and remove the buildup of weeds by scarifying the surface. Different grass species thrive in different conditions. Some will not tolerate shade, while others tall fescue will take it. Some thrive in full sun, others don't. I've got on my little cul-de-sac where I live, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 neighbors that have great big huge oak trees in their front yard, and they have no grass. They can't grow it because it just gives so much shade, and the roots are so big that they take up all the area. So you got to think about that, and maybe it's not you trim the tree some, or maybe it's you give up on the grass and go to a ground cover. Some are harder wearing and better suited to traffic areas, and that's all depends on what you're doing. If you have big dogs or lots of children that are playing in the backyard, it's going to be really tough to do. Plus, it's going to get compacted real easy. If you don't want to do sod, you may do seed, depending on a lot of different factors, but a lot of the sods that are out there are not available in seed, so you may have to do that anyway. Determine your regional growth patterns and cycles. Decide if you're going to have a warm season or cool season or a combination. Develop the maintenance you want to put into your yard. It's important to consider the pros and cons of each grass type, which we'll talk about in a minute. For instance, cool season grass needs more water during warmer season temperature, so you'll have to be out with the garden hose more often in the spring and the summer. Likewise, warm season grasses are not as tolerant of cold temperatures and will generally turn brown and go dormant in cold spells. Try to find a happy medium. We often use this term transition zone to indicate areas with hot summers and cold winters. It's a toss-up of whether or not you want to go with a cool season or a warm season. Best advice I can give you is to consider the longest season that you have and go from there. Keep your lawn well fed and watered, as well as sown and reseeded if you're doing that. And it'll help you to get through the less than optimum temperatures. So talk a little bit about, you got somebody and figured out how you're going to maintain it, but what kind of grasses are out there? So warm season grasses and cool season grasses. Most popular ones are zoysia. It's a wonderful grass that doesn't do much damage if you walk on it or have a lot of people. It takes a lot of range of soil types. However, it does need a little bit of watering and good drainage so it doesn't go dormant. And, one of the things people say, well, I got plenty of sun. Well, you need to go, if you're having issues, go out and track the amount of sun someday. You pick a day as the sun's out and see how much exactly how much sun you're getting on that area. And it needs to be full sun. It's not just, filtered through the leaves. So zoysia needs 4 to 5 hours of direct sun. And if not, it's not going to be happy. I'm not saying you can't grow it, but it's not going to be happy. Buffalo grass is popular with some homeowners that don't want to do anything to their lawn. Buffalo grass doesn't need to be watered. It's hardly ever. However, it's not as desirable to foot traffic. It doesn't like people, doesn't like animals. It just likes to be left alone. So it's possible in a sand and clay area, but it needs full sun all day long. Bermuda is the most popular type of grass that doesn't require a lot of maintenance and watering, and it thrives in a wide variety of soils, but it doesn't really tolerate real cold temperatures very well, and needs a lot of direct sunlight in order to grow. So that's 6 to 8 hours of sun. If you got much less than that, you've got some issues that you may have to deal with. Cool season grasses, we have perennial rye. It's fast growing but durable and does well in shady areas, but it needs to be watered a lot during the spring and summer. It also requires a fairly rich type of soil, which we don't generally in Tarrant County don't have much of that. Tall fescue is another grass that doesn't need to be watered as often and thrives in drought conditions. It also tolerates shade. While it's slower growing alternative, it doesn't require as much maintenance. Flying fescue is a term that includes different types of fescue grasses. They all thrive in shaded areas and don't require as much watering or maintenance. Then you have Kentucky bluegrass. It's been around a long time, but we just don't have the rich soils that it really needs. A&M tried to put some different grasses together and come up with a different variety of Kentucky bluegrass, and they call it Texas bluegrass. But it just didn't work out as well as they had hoped. If you don't water it during the summer, it goes dormant, and it's hard sometimes to get it back out. You may, need to be thinking about what other areas are out there, grasses, and most everybody goes say, hey, what happened to St. Augustine? I put it separate simply for the fact it requires more water than any of the current turfs being used as a homeowner in our area. So there are a lot of issues with it. It has more disease issues than a lot of other turfs, and it has a lot more insect issues than a lot of other turfs. So except for, specific problem spot in your yard, we quit recommending it to most people. Before I retired, I did a lot of talks out in Colleyville and South Lake and all that for the city council and some of the different environmental places. And they have an issue with a lot of people out there saying, I got to water during summer, got to water 7 days a week. No, you don't. That's really a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It doesn't, in the long run, it actually damages the roots because they can't proliferate and spread out. So think about that, and then that's the reason we kind of quit recommending. And St. Augustine, by the way, it'll take down to about 2 hours of direct sun. Prefers closer to 3 or 4. You can pretty much, over time, if you want to learn lawn maintenance, there's a lot of things you can do, and the assumption that you have other things in your life to take care of, we probably say that your lawn maintenance time is limited for most people. And nowadays, everybody's both people in the house are working, and they've got children and got running errands and taking them from one place to another. So it's done not a lot of time. There are certain things you need to do on a regular basis as necessary during growing seasons, such as mow, water, minimum regular maintenance. Takes at least twice a year during the spring and autumn. If you do a very thorough job, you're only really need to have one big maintenance session once a year. So if you follow the steps below, we'll talk about, you'll see kind of how to do it and get it ready for autumn. First things first, you got to figure out what's on your lawn. Do you have a lot of big trees that drop a lot of branches, drop a lot of acorns, all those kind of things. So you may want to think about before you get into the growing season is that you may want to use a lawn sweeper or something attached to your riding mower or a lawn tractor. Have an advantage of brushing your stems so that all of them that have been pushed down by the weight of the snow or just a bad winter, brush them so they'll come up, so it's easier for them to grow and easier for you to cut. You don't ride on a lawnmower, a stiff brush, stiff, that people use depending on what kind of grass. Some use big push brooms, some use landscape rakes. But it's just something so that you can kind of get it together. And if it's not too big a thing, you can then use your bagger on your mower and get it all cleaned up. But before you think about doing that, you got to find out where you're going to put it, because you don't want to send it off your property. You want to put it in your compost pile. Dethatching is something that a lot of people fail to do. It's called scarifying. You can do it with a rake. You can do it with a lot of different things, but it's raking out dead grass is down towards the bottom of the plant, and you really don't see it unless you get down and look. But it eventually will form a blanket over your root system and not allow the water and nutrients to get into it as easy. Again, make sure that you have a bagger to collect up the materials that come loose. You'll see it a lot. They make great compost. You don't want to send it to the lawn, into the landfill. Aeration, it's amazing how many people have a problem with compaction. So when I was working, I used to have a small pocket knife in my pocket that I carried. And, if people were having problems, we find an area that's brown, or find a problem that's having an area having a hard time growing things. And, go over and stick your knife in the ground, in the area that's green, and then go over to the brown area and stick your knife in the ground. And you'll find in most cases you can't get it to even penetrate the ground. So we sometimes have to do aeration. There's a lot of different ways to do it. We'll talk about a few of them. Prunes the roots, encourages fresh root growth. Test whether you need to do it by pushing a knife or screwdriver into the soil. Goes in easy, you don't have a problem. If you have to force it, you probably do. Smaller areas can be aerated with a garden fork, and a bit of effort. Push the prongs of the fork in hard and pull out straight. That'll help if you have a small area and don't want to go to time with it, doing it the other way. There are mechanical tools for bigger areas. They even got lawn aerating boots and shoes with those spikes on the bottom, and you can walk around. It's better than nothing, but it doesn't really help that much. Smaller areas of grass can be aerated with a garden fork and a bit of effort. So remember, once you've aerated it and got all the trash and stuff up, you got to spread some well-finished compost over the surface and let it drop into the holes, and then water it real lightly so that it helps keep the drainage effective and gives you a better root zone. Weeding, I don't like to use herbicides or chemical weed killers of any kind. That's just my personal preference. If you manage your turf well, you shouldn't need any. You choose to use them, please look at the organic choices first. If you do use weed killers, there's always a damage that they may affect subroots, shrubs and trees, not to mention the risk of affecting the ecosystem that supports fauna, earthworms, etc. And weed and feed is probably one of the big ones that we still have people, no matter how much we talk about it, we still have people using it. And you think about it, if you're putting a weed and feed down, so you're going to put something down to take care of the weeds. In most cases, your grass is not really up and growing fast. It's kind of just waking up, coming out of the summer or the winter hibernation. And so when you put it down, well, you're trying to kill some weeds, but then you're putting a fertilizer down at the same time, so you're actually making the weeds grow faster. So be careful. We don't suggest that unless it's just no other alternative. One of the big things that we see, and I've seen over the last 20 plus years, people in late spring, early summer will call and they say, last year my tree was doing great. I have a great big tree, and now it's looking bad. Well, what's causing it? So my first response always was, when did you put weed and feed down? And they said, well, February or March or whatever time they did. I said, well, that's your problem, because the chemicals that are in the weed and feed, one of the main ones that gets into is easily absorbed through the root system. and you have to water it in. So when you water it in, and it brings it right up to the root system, up into the tree, it can do damage. So again, try not to use it unless you absolutely have to. If you're looking for lawn perfection quickly, you may choose to resort to chemical weapons. That's all right. Choose a selective broadleaf weed killer. And you listen, when you look at that, it says broadleaf weed killer. It doesn't say anything else. So they kill weeds, but not the grass. Be careful not to use any general herbicides like glyphosate, or that's a major chemical in Roundup. Because they not only kill your lawn as well as the weeds, and you'll be receiving a few weeks later. If you got a really bad area, just a real patch, it's nothing but solid weeds. And you get it early enough in late winter or very early spring, you can spot treat a few areas to kill them, and then make sure the grass grows in to replace it. Weed killers in late spring when the weeds are growing strongly, and that's okay. Select your weed killer a few days after you have mown, where the soil is moist and the weather warm. Helps. You have to ensure the active ingredients stay where they are intended to and quickly circulate around the weed sap transporting system. Wait a few days before you mow the lawn again. When you see complete dieback, use your detaching tools to rake out the remainder. You're going to reseed your lawn, you can on certain things, but a lot of the new cultivars and different turfs are bred for a specific purpose, and they're sterile, the seed is. So they can only be grown by vegetative growth. So you may have to get some plugs, or you may have to get sod, and but there are some that you can reseed. Some of the common Bermudas, a few of the zoysias, obviously the buffalo grass. So if you're going to do it, break up the surface real lightly with your rake. Sow the seeds of half to 1 ounce per square yard. Follow the guidance above to decide which species to suit your program. You don't, the one thing that you want to make sure, if you are reseeding, remember that a little bit more is not always better. If you put too much grass seed out, and you're watering on a regular basis, some of them get washed away. You have too much grass seed out. Also, you'll find out one day that you have tons of birds because they love the grass seed. Feeding it, personally, I try to avoid using fertilizer. I haven't used fertilizers in my yard in 15 years. If your soil is well aerated and the grass roots are free of thatch, and you mow it and water it as needed, you should have no problem in growing weeds. Generally, when we have lots and lots of weeds in our lawn, we find one or two things. One is the nutrient levels in the soil are poor, and the other one is it's not enough. It's too much sun, not enough sun. Some of those things. So if you get everything right, you should not have a whole lot of trouble. You need to boost your grass. You can put a nitrogen-rich fertilizer once the lawn reseeded areas are growing strongly. But I would consider a soil sample if you have not done one. In a minute, we'll show you the information to do one. I had a lot of people call over the years and say, "Hey, my neighbors are putting down fertilizer. What should I put down?" And I tell them the same thing. Your guess is as good as mine. They said, "Oh, you're the expert." And I said, "I don't know what you've done before. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know any of the things, the criteria to choose one." So, I'd have to see it in order to give you a good idea. So the soil sample, you send it in, and it'll come back and it'll tell you exactly how much of the major nutrients you need. If you want to test the minor nutrients, that's good. And it'll tell you just about everything you need to do to make whatever type of soil or grass that you have grow well in your area. Follow the instructions. Make sure you don't overdo it. Slow release fertilizer is preferable. Too much fertilizer at one time will burn and kill your grass as effectively as any weed killing. Even if it doesn't kill the grass, excess fertilizer causes weak growth and can damage the roots of your grass. If your underlying soil is healthy and you've carried out all the maintenance tips that we talked about, then you can afford to do underfeeding. Consider also the organic lawn care products for natural feeding. But remember, the more you fertilize and the more you put down, the more water is going to be needed. So, for instance, you get the soil sample and it tells you need 1 pound of nitrogen. And that's fine, that's normal. But it doesn't say that you have to put all 1 pound down at one time. So consider doing like you eat, have a breakfast and lunch and dinner. Divide that 3 pounds up or 1 pound up into thirds. Put it one on this week, wait a week, put it on another one that week, and then wait another week and do the last of it. You don't have to use as much water, and it's not as much impact on the turf, and it doesn't hurt the weed system. Organic, there's tons of organic lawn care equipment, and products, but we have always suggested, I have, and most of my colleagues, is to use something like just basic well-finished compost. Occasionally, if I move to a different house or whatever I'm doing, if it needs some help, I'll get half a truckload or truckload, depending on how big the yard is. Go in and aerate it quickly. And then when you've got the holes in the ground, then you can go over and put some compost in the fertilizer spreader and just spread it over the entire yard. That way it drops, some of it gets into the holes. And then when you water it later, that helps to improve the soil and helps to improve the root structure. Remember, the more you fertilize, the more water is needed. Cutting it, that's, sometimes can be a big issue. People, excuse me, I got a cough. Depending on if you're doing lawn maintenance in the spring, depending on where you live, or you're putting a bit of growth during the winter, the temptation will be cut low so that you don't have to cut it frequently. Please don't do that. The more that you leave up on the top within reason, then the better protection that the grass roots have as far as sunlight, as far as dehydrating, and as far as weed growth. So think about that. Best advice is to keep your height fairly generous. Find out what kind of grass that you're using, and it'll give you recommended heights. So if you've got Bermuda, for instance, most of the time people will mow it at 3.5 on their mower. But there's nothing wrong with when you get into the hot part of summer, when things slow down, is to go ahead and move it up to 4 or 4.5. And leave it up there for a couple, 2-3 months. It helps protect again from the heat of the sun. Helps keep some moisture in from dehydrating as quickly. And overall, just improve what you're doing. In spring, it's even more important to keep your cutting height high for the first cuts. It used to be a lot of people would say, "Oh, I got to go and scout my yard." It can help in certain instances, but in most of the cases, it doesn't. If you put it, you're going into spring and it's getting warm soon, so everything's coming out, and that's weeds come first, and your grass is not quite ready to pop out real good. If you kill the weeds, or if you cut it too short and you allow the sunlight to hit it, it warms it up too quickly, and then that's a lot of times will encourage you more root growth or more weed growth because of the weed seeds blowing in every day. But cut it when you need to, but don't cut too short. That's always the best thing to say. Lawn care points to take away from that is that if your soil is soft and not compacted and drainage is good, then don't worry about it. But if you're having a problem, and you're going to starting a new lawn, make sure you choose the right kind of grass for your conditions. And then, then if the guy should go out, if it's a new house or a new lawn, and map the sun for a couple of days to see how much you really have. Don't dirt it in the winter if you have deciduous tree because it drops all its leaves and obviously get more sunlight. In the spring, once it comes back on, then you got a lot of shade. Choose a warm season or cool season according to where you live, and shade tolerant grass if your garden is shady. Doing your annual or biannual maintenance, and you want to follow the order of the set above, and you won't go wrong. Clear your debris, dethatch, and aerate to get the right basic conditions for new growth. Weed, reseed, and feed to allow your lawn to grow strongly if that's what you're going to do. But don't overfeed and don't cut it too short. Most important, though, thing that you can tell anybody about a new lawn is don't stress about it. Do what you can, enjoy the fresh air while you're doing it, and don't worry if your lawn's not perfect. Nothing in the garden ever is. But you always have that one person that's a neighbor, and they put so much stuff on it, the grass is green all the time. But the root zone, if you dug some of it up, you'll find is not good. It's not very deep, and it's in the long run can cause more issues than they have. Mowing it, depends on what you're doing. If you're going to California and live out there, they're planning on banning all of the combustion engines, for lawn care in the next couple of years, and then everybody's going to have to go to either manual or go to electric. So one of the top is electric, and that's fine. It works, depending on how big your yard is and all the things there. One on your left is just a normal mower that we see all the time, a rotary mower. Most of them nowadays mulch the grass back into it. And then the one on your right is another rotary mower, but it has a bagger on it so that you're bagging things. Don't bag unless you have to. And if you do have to bag, use it as something in the compost. If you've got a vegetable garden with things that are coming up, you can use it to mulch around the plants. So there's a lot of uses for it. So think about that. This is the way they were taught us at A&M to have a riding mower, and you can get more mowed at one time. It's supposed to be a joke, but some people think it's funny, some people don't. Recommended mowing practice. Ask yourself how often you sharpen your blade. Every time over the years I've done talks about lawns, and I ask them in there, I say, okay, all the people in the audience, how often do you sharpen your blade on your lawnmower? And most of them look really puzzled. They're like, sharpen it? You're supposed to do that? Yeah, you need to do that. You need to adjust your mower, make sure that it's mowing good, make sure it's mowing even, and sharpen those blades so that they cut instead of tear. Operate your mower properly. Too many people try to run behind it. Too many people don't pay attention where they're mowing. So make sure it's working good, and make sure you're mowing properly. Match speed with conditions for a quality cut. And if you get to mowing too fast, then it doesn't always end up being a good cut. Set your cutting height within the plant's tolerance range. Follow the 1/3 rule. And the 1/3 rule is simple. When you have turf, try never to cut off more than 1/3 of the leaf structure at any given mowing. And so you think, okay, that's not too bad, but depending on the height of your grasses, it can be a big problem. Some of the grasses for turf or for sports fields, golf courses, are cut. They allow them to grow up to maybe 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch, and then they cut. Well, if you're trying to cut 1/3 off of 1/4 inch, that's tough to do, and because it's regrowing. So in a lot of cases, some of the specialized areas, things like sports fields and things, you basically have to cut every single day. I don't know how many of you would think that would be fun. limit double and triple cutting. And that's just simply mowing it and then going back over it and going back over it. That's not good. Just make sure that you change the direction at every time you mow. So if you're mowing from east to west, next time mow north to south and in between. Avoid mowing when you have active disease issues. When the turf is drought stricken and maybe the cities are relegating you down to 1 or 2 days a week to water. And also when it's saturated in heat stress. I can't tell you how many times I've gone down the street and seen people mowing big yards, particularly commercial ones, 2, 3 hours after it's rained heavily. It's not good for the grass. It's not good for the turf. It's not good for the soil. It compacts it and causes issues. Like I said, raising cutting height during environmental stress periods will help you to a tremendous amount. It helps reduce the thatch, alternate mowing patterns, and mow grass when dry if possible. And so the reason we talk about sharpening things is that cutting a leaf blade on a grass plant is very stressful to the plant. You think, how can it be stressful? Well, it is. Mowing can be very harmful, but it's also needed for aesthetics and function. You let your grass grow up too big, too high, somebody from the city is going to give you a note on your door. Although turf-type grasses adapt well to mowing, they still have to recover from a wound and a reduction in the plant's energy-making factor, the leaves. So just think about it. If I cut my grass today, the grass will stop growing. If I cut too low or cut it, in the wrong time, it'll stop growing for a day or two because it has to recycle and get everything back going again before it starts growing. You cut the leaf structure, you lose fluid from the cut leaf. So that will help, cause you more trouble because you can't get enough water to it. All the carbohydrates that's stored is used to help repair the wound instead of helping keep the grass healthy. Carbohydrate production and storage is reduced. Temporary increase in water loss from cut leaves. So you're actually going to, when you cut it, you're going to lose more water than you normally would. Root growth stops temporarily. So you may have a day or two of times when your roots on your plants are not growing at all. Reduced water absorption by the roots. It takes away a lot of the ability to absorb the water up, and then it also creates entry patterns for pathogens. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Plants response to regular mowing, on a regular mowing it may range from daily to once a month. Regular mowing causes additional plant responses, which are outwardly visible and take more time for the plant to do. So depending on what you're doing, you can cause dwarfism of the plant so that it doesn't grow like it's supposed to. Increased tillering, which increases the density of the plant. Lowering of the bud line or the crown. That's where, the crown is basically above, the basic tiller area, and it's above, and that's where most of the grass growing is coming from. If you lower it too low, then there's not enough area there to grow, and so it puts it into slow up. It decreases the seed head production. You may or may not want seed. That depends on you, but if you do, you're decreasing it by mowing too often. We talk about mowing, until the early mid 1800s, mowers did not exist. You either had sheep eating it or you had big scythes that you were swinging to cut grass, but there were no mowers. So think about that. Lots of types of mowers to think about. There are rotary mowers, which are simply, the blades on the bottom going around in circles. Most of them are mulching mowers nowadays. Some have the ability to bag as well, so depending on what you're doing. But that's usually the one that people buy the most. It's generally is the most inexpensive of all the mowers. And so and it does a good job but only if the blades are sharpened on a regular basis. If you got a mulching mower, clippings do not come together to create thatch if the blades are sharp, because they're cutting it, a mulching mower, they're cutting it and they're sending it up to those baffles that you see in the picture. And then that sends it up and it comes back down and it recuts and it sends it back up and it recuts until it's small enough piece that it goes back into the ground and gives you nutrients back again. A real mower, some people like a real mower. I grew up with a real mower, but it wasn't near as fancy as this one. Had a lot of iron on it. It was very heavy. But real mowers are good for one reason, and that reason is to keep the height low on some of your finer textured grasses. This one's not that expensive because it doesn't have a motor, but they can get really expensive. And as you can see, it's got several blades on it. You have to keep those sharp even more so than a rotary mower because there's several blades going over it at the same time. If you hit sticks, you hit rocks, you can cause yourself a problem. You may have one a riding mower. That's again is a rotary, and it can have a big deck that's got one blade. It can have a bigger deck that has 2 or 3 blades. So that's, in that case, you got more blades to sharpen than you do if you have just a standard rotary mower. That is the rotary mower that is often used for sports fields and golf courses and things there. It can be anywhere from 2 to 4 times the cost of a normal rotary mower. So number one, it's expensive. The blades on that one, which you see are towards the back, they cost you, depending on where you're taking it, anywhere from $60 to $120 to have the blade sharpened. That's a lot of money when you consider a rotary mower. It has just one blade on it. You can take it into a local lawn shop or do it yourself, and it costs $6 or $7 to have it sharpened. So this one is designed for specific reasons, and I'll show you here in just a second. So Zoysia, some of the hybrid Bermudas, the best things for that. Here's one where they're mowing at 0.125 inches. That is not very high. I mean, think about it. You can't even hardly separate your fingers enough to have that. So they're mowing, basically mowing every single day. That's a lot of expense, a lot of time, a lot of energy spent. Sports fields, if they have grass and not gone to the artificial grass, depending on the variety, you're going to keep it 1 to 1.5 inches. So that makes it a little easier to cut, and you don't have to cut as often. But it all depends on what you like. Mowing higher is better for Bahia grass, which we don't really have here in Fort Worth. St. Augustine, which we do have. Centipede grass, you have to get more over into middle or to east Dallas, zoysia, and Bermuda grass. If you mow low, you're making a commitment to more frequently. So the lower you mow, the quicker it comes back, and you stay in that 1/3 rule. You want to not mow as often or as low. We think about mowing low and making that commitment, but you have to ask yourself, why are we doing it? Why are we mowing so low? It's not always the best thing to do. So consider the type of lawn you have and the type of maintenance you do. Fine textured grasses can tolerate a lower mowing. That's where you get into that 0.125 inches. Your larger blades, St. Augustine, some of your zoysia, some of your Bermuda, and even some of the buffalo grass are wider blades, so they don't tolerate that as well. 2.5 to 4 inches of normal Bermuda grass, or any other kind of grasses for the average homeowner. So on my particular mower, you move it up to level 3, and that's 3 inches. You move it up to level 4, and that's 4 inches. And yours may be different, so you have to, you may have to measure to see. But 2.5 to 4 inches is good. You start off at 2.5 earlier in the season and move to 4 inches during the middle of summer when it's so hot, and then gradually move as you get into fall, gradually move back down to the 2.5. Cultural practices, we talked about aeration. There's lots of different kind of aeration. There's core aerators, there is manual aerators, there are shoes that you can do. We talked about forks. You just have to decide what you want, but core aeration does the best job. And here you see that, and basically it has long tines that are hollow, and they'll be anywhere from 2.5 to 4 inches long. They go through into the ground as it rolls over, pulls the core out, and then tosses it to the side. That's the best way to get a good aerification. And then if you're really trying to improve your grass, you can sweep those plugs to the side, run over it with some good compost, and let it fall down into the holes. And then when you water it, it helps transfer that soil, which it was in a non-aerobic state, into an aerobic state. And that way things grow easier. And then you come back, and the cores that are left out there, you come back in a day or two and mow over them. And that just kind of pulverizes them and spreads it back over the top. And that helps a lot as far as growing and keeping area issues. There's a fancier aerator. But you ask yourself, why do we airify? Simple. If you don't, you're going to have a lot of compacted areas. Look at a college area that was having some issues. And there was a kind of a courtyard that was really nice and been there a long time. And they were showing areas that were not growing well, they were hard, and all those different things. And so I looked at it for a minute and I said, okay, when you mow with a large gang mower, right? And he said, yeah. And so when you bring it in, you start here and you mow in this direction. And I pointed out to him. And he said, yeah, how'd you know? And so you can look and see that the ground is where it's been done so many times in the same way. It's compacted so heavily nothing can grow well. So anyway, some of them remove thatch. Some of them are simply core aerators that take the core out, and some are like the one on your right that just punches a hole in the ground. Punching a hole in the ground is better than nothing. But then when you stop and think, if I'm pushing my finger, this aerator or my finger down into something that's pretty solid, and I pulled it out, what did I do something, or did I actually compact it further where I pushed that tine in there? So think about that. You can have a service come and do your aeration, or you can do it yourself. You can rent them at most any of the rental places, even some of the box stores will rent it. Just remember, if you have an irrigation system, you need to flag all the heads before you do this. And then also you're taking a chance that, ideally in an irrigation system, all the piping should be 6 inches in the ground, and these are only 3.5 to 4, so you don't have to worry about it. But sometimes you find where the piping has been they didn't want to dig as hard, or they're having issues, so they got it at 2 or 3 inches, and so you can actually perforate your lines and cause more issues. So keep that in mind. When we talk about compacted and non-compacted, if you look over at the right, that's very compacted. It's hard to get anything in between. Some of those areas in there are so tiny that you can't get water and air into them. You look over to non-compacted, you've got plenty of area to get water and air, and so non-aerobic on the compacted, aerobic on the non-compacted. no air. You got this kind of soil, I don't know how many of you do, but that's tough to grow anything. It's actually not a bad soil, and the reason is that the reason it's black is it has a lot of nutrients in it, but it's so hard and the pH is off so much that it just clots up and doesn't allow you to do much with it. And if you go over to some parts of the east part of Dallas where they have the gumbo, black gumbo, you go out into an area and you come back and your boots are covered with it. So you can look at the different soils and think about what you really need to do. Clays or soils are most susceptible to any of them, obviously. You know, we have clay, sand, and silt. If you get too much clay, it's hard to grow anything in. If you get too much sand, everything just flows right through it. Silty soils can wash off easy, so you have to kind of get a good combination of all three. You know, we talked about the stolen growth and the 1/3 rule. You can see the blade is the tallest part of it. The tiller is the part that's coming out from the bottom up. The crown is right there, usually just a hair above soil level. And then depending on what type of grass you have, some put out rhizomes, which you see on the left, which is a plant that's growing underground and then pops up, you know, a few inches, a foot, depending on where it is, and grows another plant. Stolons are the ones that actually run on the top, and you know, they can then come up in another plant. You gotta have the root system, and the better the root system is, the better off you are. You know, a lot of people think, you know, okay, if I just water it good and everything will be great. Well, you water it often, but only a short amount of time, the root system never will hardly ever get past that 3 or 4 inches in the ground. And ideally, we want most of our grass plants to get a minimum of 8 inches in the ground, if not more. So the 1/3 rule helps maintain the photosynthetic tissues where how it feeds itself from the sun. So keep that in mind when you're cutting or maintaining your yard. Here's a vertical mower. We talked about thatch. So this actually, it has blades that go up and up like that in a circle. So they don't actually cut, you know, grass like a mower, but they slice through the grass that is heavily thatched. And it just leaves really tiny lines, but it brings up the thatch area and it pulls them up into the top of the ground. And then you can get rid of that. This is what you have. If you got it really good and dethatched and you mowed it too high, that's what you have. There are a lot of grass clippings left on the ground. And you think, okay, it's just going to break down back into the soil. Well, that much of thatch or that much of grass clippings can actually keep the grass underneath it from getting any sun or getting any water. And that's where you actually are sometimes creating more thatch in the long run. Here's the older type thatch dethatcher that was, you know, one of the first ones that came out with a motor on it. And you can see it pulling up on your left there. You can see it, they've already made a couple passes, and it's pulling up to that much lighter color. So think about that if you need it. Generally, if you're maintaining it right and everything else is good, you hardly ever have to dethatch. Consider, you know, some of the issues. Causes of some of the issues can be scalping, which, you know, creates a problem earlier. It can cause disease problems and insect problems. It can also be caused by high nitrogen and pH problems. Zoysia matrella, there's 2 types of zoysia, Zoysia matrella and Zoysia japonica. And the matrella is a hybrid one that is prone to having thatch problems if you're not real careful. The japonica doesn't have as much problem. Again, after last freezes before the green up, you know, it can stimulate green up, like over here at scalp, but you have more chances of what those waters in the soil to evaporate You have more chances of weeds growing over there than you did in the not scalp area. And here's the reason we talk about sharpening your blades. On the left, that's a blade that's torn. That's a dull blade. It tears it, and so that it leaves all that broken, torn area to lose water, lose moisture, lose carbohydrates, and also with that rough of grass cooking, it's like that or cut, it can actually cause a lot of disease and problems coming in. So sometimes you're in that little neighborhood war with your neighbor, and he's cutting his grass and he fertilizes and everything looks really good, and you fertilize the same as he does, but you sometimes maybe your blade is not as sharp. And so you'll cut it one day and it'll look really good, and then the next day or the day after you look out and it's kind of got some brown spots in it. So the first idea is people needs more fertilizer, it needs more water. And what it just simply does is you cut it right, like the right one, that's cut and it heals quickly and it keeps on going. Management of turf is not that hard if you just consider it. When you're cutting grass that you let get that high, other than bagging it, it's going to cause more problems, and because you can't follow that third rule. If it's a foot or a foot and a half tall, because you don't want to be cutting off 6 or 8 or 10 inches at one time. So try not to let it get that high. If it does get that high, consider a bagger, or consider mowing it on Saturday, letting it recover a little bit, and then maybe mowing it on Wednesday to get it down a little bit more, and then recover, and then maybe the next Saturday you're mowing it down to the height that you want it to be. Remember, grass grows. Soil samples, obviously I worked for A&M for a long time, and so we suggest using the soil lab at College Station. You can get this form. It's a 2-page form. You can get it off the website. Just go to soiltesting.tamu.edu and go down to soil samples, and it'll have urban or rural. So pull the urban one, obviously, if you're in town. And just fill out the directions. The top part of it has the name and address and all those things there. Where the county, your phone number, all your information there. Then tells you the sample information is needed. So if you take more than one, you're going to label the bags of them into backyard, front yard, side yard, whatever you're doing. You tell them approximately the square feet of that area. Last time it was fertilized, if you remember, and basically what kind of fertilizer you used. And then a little bit lower it says describe any problems you have observed and want to treat. So by doing that, that gives them all the information they need to go in and run an analysis on your soil. But at the bottom of it, it tells you how much soil samples cost. I need to update this because that's a 2015 form, but it was $10 per sample for a basic one at that time, and I think it's now $12 or $13 a sample. But you can get micronutrients, you can get just plain, you can get micronutrients and boron, you can get salinity issues, you can get organic matter, you can do all kinds of things. But if you haven't taken one before, or you haven't taken one in a long time, I would recommend just the basic soil sample, because it will give you most of the information you need in order to be successful. Again, soiltesting.tamu.edu, and it gives you all the different things that you're going to need, where it's going to, who did it, phone numbers, all that information. Aggie Horticulture has a tremendous amount of information. It's a main website at A&M. It was at one time, I'm not sure now, it was at one time the #1 horticultural website in the world as far as basic horticulture. So often I tell people that, if it doesn't have the answers on it, it probably wasn't a good question in the first place. But Go to Aggie Horticulture, and you'll find all kinds of information, whether it be fruit trees, turf, insects, uh, vegetables, shade gardens, everything you can think of is all right there in one spot. So any questions? Now would be time to put them on the question and answer if you have any. The tough Texas turf. I did this a long time ago, but we made it in 3 parts: the best turf types, the lawn and maintenance mowers, and all that, and troubleshooting pests and disease. Currently, part 1 and part 2, and the one we just showed you, the modification of part 2, is available on the website on YouTube. Hopefully part 3 will soon be on YouTube so that you can go to it at any time, see the whole presentation. Excuse me. And, that way you can look at it at any time. Below is my email if you care to email me a question or you have some issues. I'll be glad to answer them for you. I do that quite often. So hopefully that answered most of your questions about tough Texas lawns. And hope that helped.
Well, we do have a few questions, Steve.
Okay.
Mike wants to know, what is a lawn sweeper?
The lawn sweeper is basically, well, you've seen them. You've seen it similar to it when the street sweepers where they go by and go around the edges of the concrete where the herb is. It's just sweeping up all the debris there. And that's what you're trying to do. If you got a big yard that has a lot of debris falling on it and you haven't raked or done anything over the winter, it's just a sweeper that you can either put behind a riding mower or however you want to do it. And it'll just help you sweep it up instead of having to simply rake it all up.
There was a question about soil sampling being analyzed and how to do that, and I think you answered that question with your last slide.
Okay, hopefully.
So, yeah, you should. Yeah, I think you got it with that. And somebody wants to know where would they go to get their blades sharpened?
Any lawnmower repair, any place that sharpens blades. There are lots and lots of places to do it. One of the questions usually comes up is, I don't even know how to take it off. Well, it's very simple. If you have just a basic rotary mower, you take the spark plug wire off so that it doesn't accidentally start, and you turn it on its side, and you'll see the blade there, and it has one bolt through the center of it. You simply undo that bolt, the blade slides off, and then you can either sharpen it or take care of it yourself. For most people that are not able to do it themselves and don't have time to take it back and forth, I always suggest to people is when you buy a mower, buy an extra blade for it. They're $7, $8, $9. So when it gets dull, you undo one, put the new one on, and then drop the other one off somewhere to get it sharpened over the next few weeks. And then later in the season, when it's time to do it again, you just simply do the same thing. The real mowers, you're going to have to take probably the whole mower in because it can be very difficult to take that off.
Okay. If you don't have a mulching feature with your lawnmower, could you run the machine over it 2 or 3 times and accomplish the same thing?
No. Not really accomplishing the same thing, because if you don't have a mulching mower, all it's doing is cutting the grass and pushing it back down on the grass that you cut. The mulching mower cuts it up and goes up into those baffles, and it recycles it 2 or 3 times so that it gets cut down to a very minute length in it, and that helps it to break down. And otherwise, you cut it and it's a little higher and you don't have the mulching capability, then you're simply going to create more thatch.
Okay. Is it too late to aerate?
No, not really. I mean, you can do it any time of the year. you know, again, you want to make sure that you flag any irrigation systems you have or any issues that you have. You don't want to do it in dead winter unless you just have to, because when you go in and aerate it all, you're pulling up some material, so you want to be able to let it get a chance to fill up with water or compost or whatever you're doing, and then it allows you to kind of recycle itself and get ready to go into the fall or whatever it may be.
An anonymous attendee says, we've been reading about micro clover as a grass alternative. What are the pluses and minuses of it?
Micro clover.
Uh-huh.
The micro clover is fairly new. Back east, you know, from New York and all those areas up in there, a lot of places grow clover as their yard, their turf area for their, you know, it looks good. It takes a very limited amount of maintenance. It helps do a lot of things for your soil. And you know, you don't have to worry about diseases and all that kind of stuff. What little bit I've read about the microclover is obviously it's a much smaller version. And so it's supposed to do equally as well, but I have not personally observed the new microclovers.
Okay. Is that like kind of more like a dollar weed or something like that?
Yeah, very similar.
Would it handle shade better?
Clover really needs more sun. It will handle quite a bit of shade, but it really needs more sun than some other things
Okay.
because it's, you know, it's all green.
Right.
So obviously to feed itself, it's going to have to go through photosynthesis to keep enough chlorophyll in it. And so you've got to have enough sunlight to do that.
Okay. Well, that's the last question that I've seen.
Okay.
And
Well, like I said, I hope it helped and answered a few questions for you. You know, there are particular yards or particular issues that come up that obviously couldn't address them all, but the best thing I can suggest to you is the Extension Service has office in every county in the state, except for like two. And those two have like one county has like 90 people and the other county has like 120 people. And they basically are two big ranches, one in each county, and all of the people there work on the ranch or, you know, do things for the ranch. But anyway, call your extension office and they have either people that are trained to answer your questions. Maybe they have some well-trained master gardeners that volunteer to answer questions. And, you know, that may be the easiest thing for you if you know, have questions that you really don't know what to do with them.
okay. Well, I think you pretty well covered everything, Steve. You did a real good job.
Well, thank you. Sorry about the cough, everybody.
Well, you don't have any control over that. Neither do I.
Can't control that.
Yeah. Okay. We want to thank everyone for their attendance, and we hope to see you again at some of our other meetings. A reminder that you will get a copy or a link to view this program again, a YouTube link. It may take a few days before you get it, so be patient. You will also get an evaluation form, and we ask that you please complete that. Okay.
And if you have time, you know, get on YouTube and just put in Tough Texas Turf. You'll find part 1 and 2 that are on there. And again, like I said, hopefully part 3 will be there so that you can refer to it any given time, day or night, so hopefully find some answers to your questions.
Doesn't the Aggie Turf site help a lot too?
Aggie Turf site has a tremendous amount. And again, you can reach that going through Aggie Turf, or you can reach it under Aggie Horticulture, which has all the divisions of it.
Okay. All right. Any questions from anyone? Any other questions? You can raise your hand if you've got one.
If you don't think of something later, you know, feel free to drop me an email. That'd be fine.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Steve. Good to see
Sure.
you.
Y'all have a great evening.
Same to
Great
you.
information, Steve. Thank you. Thanks, Dick and Teresa.
You bet.
Y'all have a good evening.
All right. Bye, everybody.